The orders came down without ceremony, just a set of coordinates in the Nevada desert, west of Groom Lake, and a narrow time window that felt more like an ultimatum than a briefing. They told us a test article had gone down, and that the response convoy that rolled out ahead of us had somehow gone dark in a communications corridor that was supposed to be clean and controlled. Command pretended it was nothing more than a glitch, but none of us believed that. Convoys don't blink out on calm nights with a full suite of antennas pointed at them. We moved under blackout protocols, creeping through a desert that swallowed sound, headlights off, comms silent except for a thin wash of static in my headset, with a faint metallic clicking hidden so deep in the noise that it felt like it was breathing. Nobody mentioned it, maybe because saying it aloud meant admitting something felt wrong. 10 miles out, headquarters repeated the line about a simple recovery: find the missing team, secure the fallen craft, and extract before daylight. They never explained why the first unit never checked back in, or what the downed aircraft was carrying that required a second team to go in blind. I'd been in special operations long enough by then to know when a mission was being wrapped in half-truths. Years of quiet recoveries and unnamed programs had carved away any illusions I once had about transparency. Our detachment existed behind rotating covers, shifting titles that meant nothing outside locked hallways in the Pentagon. If anyone asked, we handled technical retrieval, a phrase vague enough to end conversations. Inside the team room, life was simpler. Rifles cleaned in silence, gear laid out in precise patterns, and a kind of unspoken trust that only forms in units where mistakes get people buried. Major Cole Briggs led us, a man whose steady pacing and careful eyes could calm a room without speaking. I'd followed him through enough dangerous ground to know he never raised his voice unless someone's life hung on the next second. His second, Sergeant First Class Nina Torres, carried quiet authority, sharp mind, sharper instincts, footsteps so soft you felt them before you heard them. Mills handled our comms, always tinkering with wires and frequencies, like he could bend signal out of thin air. Riley, the medic, wore his exhaustion like part of his uniform, but never hesitated when blood hit the dirt. Larson ran the explosives, not one for jokes, but the only man I trusted around live charges. 2 more operators rounded out our formation, veterans steady enough to move through darkness without speaking. We staged out of a beige, windowless compound near Nellis, just concrete security doors and the hum of systems buried in the walls. From the back lot, faint glows pulsed across distant restricted ranges, the kind of lights you learn not to stare at. Before missions, the room always settled into a familiar rhythm. Briggs pacing with a cooling cup of coffee, Torres marking maps with small red strokes, Mills cycling channels, Riley lining up medical tools, the rest of us checking bolts, optics, batteries, and the small rituals that keep fear out of the mind. That night, the air felt unnaturally still, the kind of silence where even your breath seems too loud. When the intel officer finally entered, he held a sealed folder like he expected it to bite. Briggs read it first, and though his face barely shifted, I saw the tension in the way he exhaled, just enough to tell me the situation was worse than the briefing would admit. The downed aircraft was labeled Test Article 4, no type, no tail number, just classified geometry on radar before the signal vanished. The convoy sent to retrieve it had gone silent almost immediately upon reaching the crash site. No distress call, no satellite ping, no automated beacon. Command ordered us to move in fast, secure the site, recover sensitive materials, and pull out before sunrise. No air support, no drones, no supplementary units, just us and the desert. Every question Briggs asked was met with vague phrasing: unusual shielding, sensitive payload, containment protocols. When one officer briefly mentioned biological measures, he skimmed over it like he hoped we didn't hear him. They issued us 2 unmarked Humvees and a support truck filled with sealed crates that smelled faintly of antiseptic, sharp, chemical, almost sweet. The loadmaster avoided our eyes while unloading them. That bothered me more than the smell. We geared up, strapped our rifles, mounted NVGs, loaded packs heavy with ammo and batteries, more than needed for any standard sweep. The sky outside was moonless, wide, and hollow. When the gate opened, the desert felt like it was waiting for us. The engine hum vibrated through the floor, as we rolled past the boundary line into terrain that looked familiar at first and then subtly wrong, as though the land had shifted while no one was looking. The unease in my stomach wasn't fear, it was recognition. Something in the briefing didn't line up. Too many missing details, too much confidence from people who refused to look directly at the truth. I pressed my helmet back against the frame and watched the desert stretch into a flat green world through night vision. Somewhere ahead lay a crash site stripped of its first responders and a convoy erased without explanation. The deeper we went, the more the desert seemed to swallow sound. Even the wind felt absent. We followed the unmarked corridor west, a place that maps showed but no one ever talked about. And the longer we drove, the more I felt like the night itself was holding its breath. At the edge of the restricted grid, the dirt track bent toward a barren stretch of basin where the test article had supposedly come down. That was when I first felt it, a subtle pressure in the air, a faint hum under the engine noise, and the repeating click in my headset that no interference pattern could explain. It echoed just enough to feel intentional. None of us said a word. We didn't need to. The silence already told the truth. The desert wasn't empty, and whatever had gone down in that basin hadn't stayed in its wreck. We traveled in a tight three-vehicle line, across terrain that looked empty, but carried the uneasy weight of a place where people vanished without leaving footprints. The navigation truck led, with Torres chucking bearings under the glow of a dim red light, her silhouette steady even as the ground rolled beneath us. Our Humvee followed, and the support truck with Mills and those sealed chemical-smelling crates rumbled behind like a silent question no one wanted to ask aloud. The farther west we pushed, the colder the desert grew, the air slipping through my gloves and chewing at my fingers until they ached. Stars hung above us, sharp enough to look carved into the sky, and for a brief moment I wondered what kind of fall the test article had taken before carving that basin open. Briggs rode in front, leaning forward slightly, as if trying to read the darkness itself. His calm posture steadied the rest of us. Leadership's quiet confidence is a strange kind of armor, especially when the mission already feels wrong before you even reach the site. The first hour played out in silence, broken only by short radio checks, flat acknowledgments, nothing more. Mills cycled through channels, adjusting gain with small frowns tugging at the corners of his mouth. The airwaves were mostly empty, save for an occasional thin pulse of broken static that drifted in like a heartbeat losing rhythm. He said it might be environmental interference, but even in the dark I saw doubt cross his face. A faint hum settled into the night as we advanced, more of a pressure than a sound, like the desert itself exhaled something we weren't meant to hear. When I shifted in my seat, Riley glanced back from the truck behind us, his expression tight, as if he felt it too. It wasn't fear yet, just an instinctive tightening in a gut that soldiers get when the world isn't behaving the way it should. The first real sign that everything ahead was wrong came in the shallow wash off the road where a dark shape slumped near brush. The lead truck slowed, NVGs spotting a torn carcass collapsed awkwardly in the sand. We halted. Briggs signaled silently, and through my green-tinted view I saw that the animal, maybe a stray dog, maybe a coyote, was swollen, split in ways that made no logical sense. These weren't bite marks, and they weren't clean slashes. The wounds looked like something had gripped the body with uneven pressure, crushing and pulling at the same time, as if testing the structure rather than hunting for flesh. Even from inside the Humvee, the smell reached us, a sharp antiseptic sting, layered with a sweet undertone that felt entirely out of place in the cold desert. It was the same scent that clung to the sealed crates. I swallowed hard as my stomach tightened. Briggs kept the stop short. None of us wanted to be still in open sand for long. As we rolled on, the navigation display began to glitch, the map flickering, drifting just off our correct line before snapping back. Torres tapped the receiver twice, her frown deepening. Nothing dramatic enough to call out, but every small malfunction added to the quiet dread building inside the cabin. Then the radios acted up again. Mills caught a repeating clicking buried in the static, irregular but persistent. He checked every cable, every connector, every battery, all clean. The clicking remained. When we reached the first coordinate for the missing convoy, I expected to see dust tracks or trucks staging for recovery. Instead, a single Humvee sat partially swallowed by sand, tilted like it had been abandoned mid-turn. One headlight pointed into nothing, The other dangled from torn wires. We dismounted quickly. The cold slapped my face as I swept the ground. Torres and two operators moved ahead, rifles carving arcs of silent warning. Inside the stranded truck, the radio was smashed beyond repair. The seats empty, a smear of dried blood stretching across the driver's side handle. No bodies, no drag marks, no footprints worth following. Not even signs of struggle, just absence, as if the people had been unmade rather than taken. The same antiseptic sweet smell clung to the air. We regrouped and pressed forward on foot for a stretch before remounting, more cautious now. Briggs wanted eyes on the terrain before we committed to wheels again. The second wreck appeared not long after, overturned on its passenger side, wheels spinning gently in a wind that wasn't air. The windshield had blown outward, glass sprayed across sand in a wide arc. The inside looked gutted, seats ripped, consoles smashed. The metal showed curved storing marks, gentle arcs that didn't match tools, weapons, or animals. Mills tried hailing the missing convoy again. Static replied. Then the clicking came through, louder this time, short bursts, fading in and out as if something brushed against the channel rather than spoke into it. I listened long enough to feel the pattern wasn't random. It sounded like movement translated into signal. The ground dipped as we reached the edge of the basin. A faint glow reflected off scattered cloud above us, something burning or smoldering ahead. Briggs signaled a halt. Engines died to soft whines. We moved forward on foot, spread into a semicircle, rifles raised. Through NVGs, the glow sharpened into jagged silhouettes. A broken aircraft sprawled across a shallow basin, metal torn in long, violent patterns. Around it, the convoy lay scattered. Trucks crashed into each other, doors hanging, crates shattered. Some vehicles looked like they tried to turn around and collided in panic. The radios hissed loudly as we approached, static swelling into a harsh wash of noise before the clicking returned, clearer, closer, almost curious. We killed engines entirely. The silence that followed felt unnatural, as if the desert held its breath. We advanced in a wedge formation, the crash site ahead like a glowing wound cut into the night. The closer we came, the stronger the antiseptic sweet smell became, coating the back of my throat. The crash site wasn't OP. It wasn't quiet, and nothing about it suggested the convoy had walked away. This wasn't a recovery mission anymore. It was the beginning of something worse. The first body lay half buried near a shattered transport crate, and even before I bent down, the sight of it told me this mission had already crossed into territory we weren't prepared for. The uniform looked fused into the flesh around the shoulders and chest, like heat and cold had struck at the same time, warping skin and fabric into a single ruined layer. The wounds didn't resemble blast scatter, shrapnel, bullets, knives, or any weapon I'd seen. More like something had gripped the torso in uneven pulses, twisting the tissue in ways that made my stomach coil. Riley crouched beside the corpse and let out a low, controlled breath, the kind medics use when they're trying not to react. The odor around the body was overwhelmingly sharp, sterile, chemical, almost medical, blended with the sweet rot that clung to the back of my throat. It wasn't the smell of death, it was the smell of something foreign mixed with it. We pushed toward the wreck, and the broken aircraft finally loomed over us in full view. Up close, nothing about it resembled the standard frames we were accustomed to extracting. Sections of the fuselage were smooth and rounded, as if shaped in a mold rather than bolted together. Other areas were reinforced with strange layered plating that wrapped around a central cargo bay. The tail had separated cleanly and lay several yards away, resting inside a scorched ring where sand had burned in a perfect arc. Fire should radiate outward, but here it curled around empty space like the physics had folded. Briggs split us into two teams. Torres guided a pair of operators toward the convoy vehicles while I stayed with Mills and another man to push deeper into the torn-open cargo bay. The ramp had snapped during impact, leaving one panel hanging by twisted hinges that scraped softly against gravel when the wind shifted. Inside, the space looked like something had forced its way outward from the center. Mounting rails bent in smooth curves instead of jagged angles, restraint brackets stretched like softened metal, and a large containment pod lay tilted at the far end with a long split running along its inside edge. Whatever cracked it had done so from within. Thin, dried streaks dripped down its surface, matching the same chemical sweet scent we kept encountering. Mills swept his flashlight across the bay walls. Curved scratch marks overlapped each other in chaotic arcs, too tall for a human crouch, too low for someone standing, following no pattern of limbs or tools. When he tried radioing Briggs, the transmission cut mid-word. Only static answered, broken by that same rhythmic clicking that vibrated faintly through the floor plates under my boots. The metal tremor made the hair on my arms rise. Along the side bulkhead, a section had been pushed outward from an impact that didn't leave a recognizable print, just warped pressure points that looked like someone had tried to force their way through the wall without hands. Torres called for regroup over comms, but her voice came through in jumps, as though part of the signal was being swallowed. We stepped back outside, and the night hit us with a cold silence. No breeze, no engine hum, only the faint crackle of debris cooling in the dark. Briggs stood between two mangled convoy trucks, studying the ground where shallow disturbances cut across the sand, smooth gliding impressions rather than footprints. Not drags, not steps, more like something heavy, skimmed the surface without putting full weight down. We had barely reformed our line when a sound drifted across the basin, a ragged human cry, frayed with pain, ending in a wet, choking noise. Every one of us froze. Rifles lifted, NVGs scanned. The clicking returned, louder now, echoing from beyond the range of our lights, repeating itself in odd intervals, like something was moving around us and answering its own noise. We approached the source of the scream with deliberate steps. The basin felt wider, as if the dark had stretched while we weren't looking. Briggs signaled a split. Torres flanked right with her element, while I took the left. Our arcs overlapped through broken silhouettes of trucks and shattered tail sections. The cry had come from a shallow depression downwind of the crash. There we found a collapsed tent, poles bent as though someone had fallen against them with violent force. Gear lay scattered, a crushed flashlight, a med pouch torn open, sand churned without clear tracks. The smell here was overwhelming, a suffocating mix of chemical sharpness and sweet rot that coated my teeth. The second corpse lay face down beside the collapsed tent. Riley approached, checked pulse and pupils, then shook his head once and stepped back. The man's torso was a map of contradictions. Patches of skin frozen pale and rigid like frostbite, while surrounding tissue was blistered and warped as though exposed to intense heat. It looked like several injuries forced together by something that didn't understand how human bodies worked. Mills whispered that the clicking was returning. When we all went still, it faded. When one of us shifted gear or brushed metal, it answered from a different angle. It wasn't random, it was listening. Briggs tightened our formation. The crash site felt like a maze of blind corners, shadows bent strangely through the wrecks. We moved toward a narrow gap between two overturned Humvees, where one of our operators stepped ahead to check the angle. He leaned slightly, NVGs tilted, scanning. His posture stiffened, then something struck him in the dark. His rifle clanged against metal, NVGs flew from his helmet, and a muffled struggle broke out so fast none of us saw the attacker clearly. We reached him in seconds. A blare slid behind a nearby vehicle frame, a low, smooth movement, too fast to track. I caught only a curving outline, like a shadow bending around metal before disappearing entirely. The operator lay gasping, armor dented inward as though gripped by uneven force. Dark branching discoloration spread across his neck, like something had pressed beneath the skin. The chemical sweet smell radiated from his vest. Riley moved in, checking vitals, trying to keep him conscious. Gage began placing charges around likely approach points, hands steady despite the tension. Whatever had escaped that containment pod hadn't fled the crash. It was here in the dark with us, learning our movements, circling, waiting for another opening. And the night around us felt suddenly too small to hold it. Gage planted the last of the small charges with the steady focus of someone who'd done this too many times to let fear crack through his concentration. His hands pressing detonators into shallow pockets of sand and bracing them against broken truck frames. While he worked, Briggs tried reaching command again, but every attempt dissolved into hard static, the clicking bleeding into the transmission with a clarity that didn't belong on any encrypted line. It felt closer now, sharper, almost deliberate. Therese called us over to a partly intact storage container she'd found wedged between two burned-out convoy trucks. Inside were waterproof sleeves stuffed with documents, most of the pages scrubbed clean of classification markings, but the symbol repeated across them, one I'd seen only in black runes requiring 2 keys and 3 signatures to enter. These weren't routine recovery notes. They belonged to programs deeper than our unit ever touched. The language on the pages was cold, clinical, and frighteningly detached. No mention of a creature, no mention of life. Only phrases like mobile asset, adaptive response, signal reactive, structural reorganization, and other lines describing a thing that responded to heat, sound, electromagnetic interference, something meant to remain sealed in that containment pod unless damaged. As I skimmed the fragments, the desert around us felt unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that made every small sound feel amplified. We didn't get long to read because a metallic crash erupted behind us, snapping every rifle upward. The rear security truck groaned as its frame bent inward, blasts exploding outward rather than in. Dust shot up as if something had struck it with impossible leverage. We sprinted toward it, but by the time we reached the shattered door, one of our operators was gone. No cry, no scuffle, just a smear of blood across the inner panel, and strange scrape marks carved into the metal. Too many, too varied, none matching any claw, blade, or tool we knew. Riley muttered something sharp under his breath, and even Briggs, usually stone-faced in chaos, had his jaw clenched and eyes scanning the dark like he was expecting movement at any second. The truth settled over the team without needing to be spoken. The thing that broke from the pod wasn't dead, wasn't incapacitated, and wasn't fleeing. It was hunting. Briggs ordered Mills to push a sitrep through, no matter the signal quality. Mills managed to shove a broken transmission up the chain, garbled but recognizable. We formed a tight defensive circle in the most open patch of ground we could find while waiting for a reply. When command finally answered, their voices were disturbingly calm, too calm. They told us to hold position and await further instructions, tone flat, measured, almost bored. No urgency, no alarm, nothing acknowledging the carnage surrounding us. While they spoke, the clicking rose again, both through the radio and from the darkness around us, syncing in a pattern that felt intentional, like it knew we were listening. The moment the transmission ended, Briggs stepped away from the group, and when he turned back, I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before, a weight, a resignation, maybe even guilt. He motioned me and Torres closer, and had Mills switch to a more heavily encrypted channel. The signal snapped twice before stabilizing. What came through was fragmented, but the tone said more than the words. This wasn't a rescue call, it was a status check, to confirm whether their contingency plan needed to advance to the final stage. When he killed the transmission, Briggs stood still for several seconds, shoulders rigid, as if trying to process what he already feared. Then he told us the truth. Command had prepared for failure from the start. If the asset escaped containment, recovery became secondary to full lockdown. Full lockdown didn't include a plan for our survival. We want the solution. We were the experiment, the test case for how a trained team performed against something that didn't follow rules of anatomy or physics. The first convoy hadn't been a rescue attempt. It had been an initial data point. Their silence had been the answer command needed. Torres stiffened, staring at the ground as if she could read the imprint of every step that led us here. Briggs opened a pouch strapped to his vest, one he'd never mentioned, and inside was contamination gear none of us had been briefed on. Beneath it, a rugged tablet flickered to life, revealing deeper notes about the asset. No photos, just outlines of behavior patterns, reactivity to sound, heat, radio, its ability to mimic rhythmic patterns. Something about reorganization capability following significant injury. Most of the data looked incomplete, like scientists had been guessing at the edges of something they barely understood. The cold that slid through my gut wasn't fear. It was the realization that we weren't hunting something unstable. It was hunting us, learning us, adapting to us. Torres asked if we could withdraw on our own. Briggs shook his head. If we broke from orders, command might mark us as contaminated and erase the entire grid, including us. Our only chance was keeping the threat inside the basin long enough to prove we still had value alive. As I looked toward the crash, the wreckages seemed darker, heavier, crowded with presence, something unseen listening to every one of our breaths. The clicking drifted again, soft at first, then threading itself into a faint rhythm that matched one of Mills's earlier radio checks. He froze mid-motion. The sound wasn't random anymore. It was repeating fragments of our own comm patterns. Mills recorded the newest clicking burst and replayed it. Hearing our own call signs woven into that alien cadence made the hairs along my spine stand straight. The wreckage around us felt alive with hiding places, every twisted frame and jagged shadow deep enough to swallow a moving shape. And that thing, whatever had crawled out of the containment pod, knew exactly how to use them. Under a collapsed wing, I glimpsed a curved surface pulling tight against metal, shifting with a liquid smoothness no living creature should have. As I stepped between two wrecked trucks for a clearer view, the smell hit, sharp antiseptic layered over a cloying sweetness, and a warm breath of air brushed along my sleeve as gravel shifted beside my boot. I swung my rifle toward the motion, but the shape slipped away before I could see more than a ripple of darkness. Returning to the others, I could tell we were losing the advantage trained soldiers usually rely on: control over terrain, over sightlines, over the next move. Even our gears seemed to strain under the pressure. Thermal scopes flickered with brief flashes of heat, long, distorted shapes that vanished as soon as anyone tried to track them. Then command finally responded, and their message was the last thing we wanted to hear. An air asset was preparing for intervention if our situation deteriorated. Briggs didn't need to explain what that meant. If the threat broke beyond the basin's perimeter, they'd burn the entire grid clean, and we'd go with it. We regrouped near one of the least damaged trucks, the night settling into a suffocating stillness as Mills tried for another stable channel. The radio clicked once, then died again. Moments later, the wrecked aircraft groaned, a deep metallic strain echoing through the basin like something large was dragging itself through the hollow frame. That sound galvanized us. Waiting wasn't an option anymore. Whatever hunted us was ready to strike again. Briggs gathered us behind a broken wing and laid out the plan in a low, tight voice. If we couldn't outrun it, we'd have to force it into a fight on our terms. The wreck gave us cover. The crushed vehicles created natural choke points. If we could funnel it into one of those narrow lanes, Gage's remaining charges might be enough to pin it down or kill it. Gage worked quickly, placing the last of the explosives beneath warped axle housings and wedging them into bent wheel wells. He built a funnel between the fuselage and a rock outcrop, a crude kill corridor that might buy us seconds if the creature committed to it. While Mills linked the detonators, I braced myself for the worst job: bait. Noise was the only guaranteed lure. The thing reacted to patterns, so we started striking metal surfaces with rifle butts and sending short bursts of static across open channels. Our echoes bounced around the basin for several seconds before a familiar clicking answered, slow, uneven, closing the distance between each of its taps. My pulse spiked. Mills caught the first movement on Thermal, a long, hot shape gliding along the wreck edge before disappearing behind a crushed Humvee. Another flare of heat appeared near the broken tail. The thing was circling us faster than before. We kept hitting metal, drawing it toward me. The clicking sharpened, its cadence tightening whenever I shifted position. Dragging a loose panel behind me, I scraped a long, deliberate warning across the wreck. The sound triggered it. Movement surged behind a leaning slab of fuselage. Then a shadow uncoiled, rising just high enough for me to catch a glimpse of something that might have been a head or simply another curve of its shifting mass. It lowered again and slid toward me. It retreated into the kill funnel. Gage whispered he was ready. Behind the outcrop, the others crouched low, weapons trained on the corridor. The clicking grew louder, echoing off metal as though the creature were inside the wrecks rather than behind them. Then it entered the funnel. A long, rippling form glided through, patches of its surface reflecting faint NVG glow in ways that made its body hard to follow. It didn't walk, it advanced by compressing and stretching, sliding itself across the sand. A section of its upper mass lifted slightly, revealing a sideways mouth-like structure that dripped fluid sizzling on metal. Gage hit the first detonator. The explosion slammed the corridor shut behind the creature, collapsing vehicle frames in a cloud of dust. The blast jolted it forward into a Humvee, twisting a panel outward with a force that bent thick steel like foil. A horrible sound erupted from it, air forced through fracture chambers, not a scream but something primal. We opened fire. Bullets hit, some sinking in, others sparking or disappearing through areas where its surface seemed to shift away from the impact. Dark, viscous fluid sprayed and steamed as it struck metal. The creature lashed out with a limb-like extension, striking one of our operators and sending him crashing sideways. Torres dragged him back under fire. The thing surged deeper into the corridor, trying to escape the tightening angles. Gage signaled the kill pocket ahead was still clear. We had one chance to finish this. Keeping pressure on it, I fired in bursts, pushing it toward the final trap. Its movements grew frantic, scraping metal aside, twisting its shape to squeeze through narrowing gaps. Every step forward pulled us closer to the only moment we might survive this thing. The creature forced itself through the narrowing corridor with disturbing determination, its shifting body grinding against metal as it pressed into the final kill pocket we had prepared. Twisted fuselage walls boxed it in on three sides, and the sound of its weight dragging across bent steel filled the space with a metallic groan that made my teeth clench. Briggs whispered for us to hold fire until it was fully committed. The thing's upper shape lifted slightly, reflective points, either eyes or wet surfaces, glinting in the faint NVG glow as it turned toward us. Gage tightened his grip on the detonator, waiting for Briggs's signal. The corridor seemed to hold its breath. Then Briggs gave a sharp nod, and Gage hit the trigger. The explosion rolled through the wreckage like a thunderous wave, compressing the corridor inward as steel frames slammed together. Dust blasted upward in a choking plume, swallowing our lights and pounding against my chest like a physical blow. I dropped to one knee, a shrapnel pinged off nearby debris, the heat of the blast washing over me in a harsh sand-filled gust. For several seconds, the world shrank to winning ears, swirling dust, and the taste of metal on my tongue. When the air finally began to settle, I pushed myself upright, coughing as the silhouettes of the others appeared through the haze. We moved toward the collapsed pocket, weapons ready. At first, the mound of fused metal and debris didn't move, then a long bulge rose from the center, pushing upward in slow, uneven pulses. The creature was still alive under all that twisted steel. A faint clicking vibrated through the mound, slower now but deeper, as if the thing was gathering strength. Briggs ordered concentrated fire into the gaps. We unloaded round after round, the impacts splattering dark fluid that hissed and bubbled as it touched sand. The smell was overwhelming, acidic, sweet, and sharp enough to sting my eyes. I lobbed 2 grenades into the larger fractures. The blasts collapsed the pile again, metal raining down in sheets. For a moment it looked like the mound had gone still, then another heave pressed upward from beneath, the structure rising like something trying to breathe through crushed ribs. Torres shouted that command was calling through. Mills raised the radio with shaking hands. I didn't need to hear the words to know the result. The tone in his eyes told the whole story. The strike package was already inbound. They weren't coming to help us. They were coming to erase everything inside the basin, including whatever was left of the creature and any trace we'd ever been here. They didn't ask for a status report. They didn't ask if we were still alive. Their only priority was containment by force. Gage and Riley dragged the injured operator toward the nearest vehicle, lifting it inside as Torres covered the rear, her rifle tracking the mound that refused to die. I grabbed Mills's remaining gear and helped haul it to the truck, the clicking beneath the debris getting slower but somehow heavier, as though each pulse reverberated through the wreckage. A section of metal bulged outward, bending for a moment before sinking again. Through a small gap, I saw part of its body stretched thin under pressure, a reflective point staring out like an eye, dimming but still aware. Briggs shouted for us to mount up. Engines roared to life. Tires sprayed dust. I climbed into the back of the Humvee, heart hammering, rifle trained out the window as we pulled away from the wreck. In the mirror, the collapsed kill pocket vanished behind rising dust, then behind the ridge as the desert swallowed the view. Seconds later, a jet screamed overhead, low, fast, its underside lights flashing briefly as it tore across the basing. I gripped the handle and braced myself. A heartbeat later, the horizon behind us ignited. A wave of light rolled across the ground, followed by a deep, crushing series of detonations that shook the sand under our tires. The sound rumbled through my bones, a heavy, consuming roar that drowned all thought. A plume of smoke and fire climbed into the night sky like a wall rising behind us. Briggs ordered lights off and told the drivers to keep pushing. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. Each of us carried the same silent truth, that we didn't know whether our charges killed the creature first, or if the strike simply buried something still capable of moving. As we passed the outer checkpoint, another distant boom echoed across the desert. Command wasn't taking chances. I kept watching the glow fade in the mirror, hoping the creature was gone but unable to shake the memory of its deliberate clicking under the wreck. We reached the secure gate as dawn hovered just below the ridgeline. Guards in full protective suits waited, their masks hiding any expression. They took the wounded operate. The rhythm of their boots on concrete echoed faintly, too close to the clicking we thought we left behind. When they ushered the rest of us inside the decontamination bay, the real dread began. The decontamination bay felt less like a safety measure and more like a boundary we weren't meant to cross back out of. Medical staff in full suits moved us through bright corridors without speaking, their visors reflecting our faces like warped silhouettes. They drew blood, scraped slobs, ran cold scanners along our spines, and checked our reflexes with the precision of people looking for something specific, but unwilling to tell us what it was. One doctor flicked a pinlight across my eyes and asked me to track her finger, though her expression behind the mask never changed. Riley was taken to a separate room for deeper scans, machinery grinding behind the wall and a rhythm that reminded me too much of metal shifting in the wreck. Mills sat beside me afterward, rubbing at the spot where an IV line had been pulled from his wrist, quietly asking if I still smelled that strange combination of sweetness and disinfectant. I didn't want to admit it, but I nodded. Hours passed before the debrief team entered. Clean uniforms, calm faces, voices trained to sound neutral. They questioned us in layers. The first round focused on coordinates, movements, and timing. The next circled the crash itself, carefully steering around any words we chose that implied intelligence or intent. Inflected flat select, silent, straight, inflected fact. When Riley tried describing the wounds on the bodies, they interrupted and reframed his answers in cold terminology that stripped out every detail he was trying to convey. Briggs remained unshaken through each round, sticking strictly to verifiable facts. Torres answered with the same steadiness, though the tightening in her jaw each time they dismissed her observations made it clear she saw the pattern forming. When it was my turn, they asked about the clicking, about the smell, about the way the creature's shape moved through metal. But every time I used the word creature, they replaced it with unidentified force, correcting my language as though the truth could be edited out if phrased incorrectly. By afternoon, they let us rest. Food trays were placed in front of us, but no one touched them. Mills stared blankly at the wall. Riley sat with his hands clasped and distant, and the injured operator never returned from behind those curtains. When we asked where he'd been taken, the staff pretended not to hear. That evening, a new officer walked in holding a thin folder and read an official statement that felt like it had been prepared long before we ever stepped into that basin. According to the record, the convoy had suffered a mechanical accident. A fire had consumed most of the vehicles, and we had been caught in a secondary explosion during a routine assistance mission. No mention of the crash. No mention of the containment pod. No mention of the thing that stalked us through twisted metal. Just a sanitized script, delivered without eye contact, intended to override everything we had endured. When he finished, he closed the file and left without waiting for questions. Afterward, they escorted us out of the debrief wing, guiding us past a sealed storage bay where fresh concrete dust coated the floor. Something heavy had been moved inside. A thin line of antiseptic sweet odor leaked from the edges of the door, faint but unmistakable. The same scent that clung to the creature, to the crashed pod, to every body we found. I didn't look too long, none of us did. But that was the moment I understood how much of the truth they intended to bury. The next morning, they dispersed us one by one. No warnings, no discussions, no chance to talk as a team. Briggs was taken first, offering us a single glance before he disappeared through a guarded hallway. Torres left the following day, assigned to a program overseas without explanation. Gage was ordered to a stateside unit and told not to ask questions. Riley remained for extended medical review. I never learned what they found in his scans. Within a week, the team didn't exist anymore. I stayed on base for a few days performing pointless tasks meant to keep me busy. Every hallway felt too sterile, too silent. Sometimes the air vents carried a faint chemical sweetness that made me stop walking and listen for a clicking sound that thankfully never came. On the day they cleared me to leave, Mills approached quietly and slipped a small encrypted drive into my hand. Later, alone in a room, I opened it. A single audio file played through static. Beneath the noise, faint but deliberate, was the clicking, shaping part of my old call sign before fading away. I sat motionless long after the sound ended. Months passed. I heard scattered rumors through channels that were never meant for civilians. An unexplained lockdown on a distant range, a hazmat team deployed without announcement, a classified transport that vanished from logs. None of it surprised me. I kept notes of my own, short lines, sketches, distances, and scents, because some memories refuse to fade unless you trap them on paper. I realized the creature we fought might not have been the only one, and the program responsible hadn't stopped. What stayed with me more than fear was the quiet certainty that we had been measured, our decisions, our reactions, our survival time against something built to break rules. The official report mentioned none of that, but the memory of that clicking in the dark still follows me in quiet rooms. People laugh about Area 51 because they've never heard that sound when the world goes still. They've never seen metal bend around something invisible. They've never watched command choose silence over survival. I don't tell this story to convince anyone. I tell it because it happened. And because somewhere out there, buried under official lies and desert sand, something learned the shape of our voices and might still remember them. When the lights go out and the desert goes silent, some stories don't stay buried, no matter how many reports try to erase them. If you made it this far, you already know the truth sits deeper than the official line. And somewhere out there in that wasteland of sand and broken metal, something still remembers us. If you want more stories like this, more classified missions, more haunted battlegrounds, more dark military mysteries, hit subscribe, tap the like button, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This is Captain Rebel, signing off. Stay sharp out there.